Good afternoon or good morning, and welcome to the Power of Positive Adoption and Foster Care Stories using a Speakers Bureau for Recruitment. I'm Tracy Surjanian. I'm the Director of Capacity Building and Engagement at AdoptUSKids. And in just a moment, I'll introduce my colleagues who will be presenting on our webinar today. First, let's cover a bit of housekeeping. The webinar will be 1 hour. We will record the webinar and share the link to the recording with you. Your line will be muted throughout the webinar, but we do want to hear from you. So please use the questions panel to ask questions and to let us know if you experience any technical difficulties so we can help you out. After the webinar, you will receive an email with a link to an evaluation survey. Your feedback is very important and helpful to us as we plan events, so we ask that you please take a moment to complete the survey. Next slide, thanks. On the webinar today, we'll be hearing from Bob Hearn, National Project Director at AdoptUSKids, June Dorn, Federal Project Officer with the U.S. Children's Bureau, Melissa Otero, National Campaign Director at AdoptUSKids, and I'm Tracy Surjanian, as I said. And we'll also be joined by a panel today, including current members of the AdoptUSKids Speakers Bureau and a child welfare professional, who are going to share their experiences with us. So now I'm going to hand it over to June Dorn to welcome you to the webinar and provide some opening remarks.
Thank you, Tracy, and good afternoon and welcome to everyone for joining us today on the webinar about the value of having a Speakers Bureau to assist with your recruitment efforts. We really have such a nice representation of participants today from across the nation. And I really want to thank you for taking the time to join us. I do hope that this information will be beneficial to you in your efforts to support your own recruitment efforts. At the Children's Bureau, we've been very impressed with our talented staff and partners of our AdoptUSKids project, and we're very excited about their success at building a National Speakers Bureau, and also in supporting and building the capacity of the states in their efforts to do so. So I'm very happy and pleased that you'll be able to hear directly from them today. And you'll also be hearing from some of our very experienced and talented national spokespersons too. So again, thank you all for joining and hope you do all enjoy this time. Now back to Tracy.
Thank you, June. So before we move into our presentation, I'll take a moment to review our mission and our goals for today's webinar. So AdoptUSKids is a national project of the U.S. Children's Bureau. We work to raise public awareness about the need for foster and adoptive families for children in the public child welfare system, and to assist states, territories, and tribes with recruiting, engaging, developing, and supporting foster and adoptive families. Next slide, please. Our goals today are to provide an overview of the purpose and benefits of a Speakers Bureau, hear how states, tribes, and territories can leverage speakers to raise public awareness and support recruitment efforts, highlight strategies for implementing a Speakers Bureau and making it successful at the local level. Next slide. And discuss development of messaging for speakers, learn from current Speakers Bureau members and their state counterparts about the benefits of speakers, and highlight available resources, including how AdoptUSKids can support states, tribes, and territories in your work. We thank you so much for joining us, and let's get started. Melissa, I'm handing over to you to kick off with an overview of Speakers Bureau.
Thanks, Tracy. I'd like to begin with a collective understanding of a Speakers Bureau, as we'll be referring to it throughout this presentation. So for us, a Speakers Bureau is a group of individuals who can speak, support, and promote an organization or issue. They're usually volunteer. However, I'm sure that a lot of you are familiar with professional or celebrity Speakers Bureau, which are often not on a volunteer basis. Speakers have experience, knowledge, and expertise that align with the mission of the organization. And these speakers really narrow the gap between talking about something and fully understanding it. And so for this reason, Speakers Bureau programs are a very popular and effective means of promoting education, understanding, and generating awareness. We created a formal Speakers Bureau with a philosophy that we are committed to identifying, engaging, developing, and supporting a Speakers Bureau consisting of spokespeople who represent the wide diversity of characteristics of those who have adopted children and youth from foster care, youth who have been adopted from foster care, as well as experts and professionals in adoption and foster care. We drafted this formal statement to really contradict our old way of identifying and utilizing the speakers, where we would often connect with people, we would work with them for a particular event or opportunity, and really that was kind of the extent of it. We didn't do much training, and if we did, it was usually done very close to the time of the event, and it worked for us about 90% of the time, but for the 10% of the time that did not work, it was very painful. Speakers bureaus can benefit in several ways, such as promoting positive yet realistic information, an increase in positive media stories to balance the negative. We always say that the media does a wonderful job of generating negative stories around foster care and adoption. It can increase visibility of an organization or issue and increase interest from a variety of targeted audiences, and generate more inquiries and interest from potential foster and adoptive parents and some untapped communities. And I think a benefit that we truly see here is that it's ready access to families, issue experts, and youth as multiple opportunities arise to share their stories. So let's do a poll question. We could go to that. And the question, how does your agency include personal stories from families in recruitment and public awareness? We'll give everyone just a minute to respond to that, and then we'll take a look at the results. Okay, great. Can we take a look at the results? Okay. So great. It looks like many of you are engaging with sharing stories, not a lot of training, and not some personal stories. So that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, Tracy, I am going to turn it back to you for just a moment.
Thanks, Melissa. So as we saw from the poll, some folks are using speakers bureaus or trained speakers for recruitment, but maybe there's an opportunity to do that some more. We know many child welfare systems are looking for new ways to recruit, foster, adoptive, and kinship families who can meet the needs of children in foster care. One approach that we have used on the national level, and that can be a valuable strategy on a local level, is having a trained and supported speakers bureau of families, including parents and youth, as well as professionals, who can share their stories related to adoption, foster care, and kinship care. A speakers bureau can be a useful part of your overall set of recruitment strategies as you seek to improve placement stability and permanency for children in foster care. Used effectively, a speakers bureau can give child welfare systems an additional messaging strategy and pool of messengers to help raise awareness and help the community understand more about the realities of foster care, kinship care, and adoption. It can also be a powerful way to engage and elevate youth and family voices, and a way for people with lived experience with foster care, kinship care, and adoption to have a broader impact on behalf of children and families. You can use your data about children and youth in care and the families that you need to guide you in identifying families and youth who can support your recruitment goals. So identifying family and youth to be speakers that can support your recruitment goals. So for example, with the goal of recruiting more families for teens, AdoptUSKids has worked to ensure that our Speakers Bureau includes families who have adopted teens and young adults who were adopted as teens and can share those stories. These trained speakers can help the public connect with recruitment messages by seeing and hearing from real foster and adoptive families, and this may help prospective families to see themselves in the same role. Next slide, please. There are multiple ways to incorporate trained speakers and members of a speakers bureau in various parts of your work to help add personal stories and perspectives and to reach your audience in compelling ways. As part of your recruitment efforts, these speakers can put real family stories and experiences in the public eye. This can help raise awareness both of the need for families and of what foster and adoptive parenting is like, and can help strengthen understanding of the experiences and perspectives of youth with lived experience with foster care and adoption. Including trained speakers in your orientation or information sessions for prospective parents gives them the chance to hear directly from parents and youth or young adults. And the insights from these speakers provide a valuable addition to the information that child welfare professionals can share. Similarly, having trained speakers, whether parents or youth, can help foster and adoptive parents who are in training see how the material that they're learning applies to real-world situations and families. Melissa, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. And a few other ways that we have utilized Speakers Bureau members at different events, promotions or media opportunities, focus groups. We have used several families to help inform some communications efforts, which have been extremely helpful, as well as online opportunities. So that could be featuring their story on our website, in videos, using their photo, quotes, and additional features or stories as they relate to different media opportunities as well. Okay, so let's get started with how to implement a Speakers Bureau. So I've worked with a few agencies across the states, and there really are a variety of ways that you can develop a Speakers Bureau and still be successful. If time, for example, is an issue, you can do this on a smaller scale, or if you have staff and resources to put against this on a more formal basis, this can be something a little bit larger. So first, we recommend defining what you want your goals to be for the Speakers Bureau. For example, are you looking to recruit more foster and adoptive parents, improve public perception, and or is there a particular audience you're trying to reach? For example, Tracy mentioned teens. So once you have your goals in mind, you can begin recruiting spokespeople for the Speakers Bureau. That could include adoptive or foster parents or youth, again, from a variety of backgrounds, all who are willing to share their experiences publicly. And we often say they're positive experiences. And I purposely say positive because, again, I think there's already a lot of negative out there. And positive can be interpreted in many different ways. And I think in this case, it means perhaps a successful adoption, enriching or highlighting the benefits of family and permanency. And during our training that we do with families and youth, we talk about not necessarily sugarcoating anything. It's okay to discuss challenges and realistic situations, but we found that there really isn't a huge benefit to concentrating on the negative. Or a lot of information such as why youth are in care, how many foster homes they've been in, how many times they've switched schools. We talk about this being kind of the Disney effect. And I do love Disney movies, but they do follow a particular formula in which they kind of highlight tragedy in order to showcase a magical happy ending. So a few ways that we have successfully recruited spokespeople from our website, the AdoptUSKids website. We have a section on the site called Join the Conversation and Share Your Story feature, which is in the link here on the slide. And in that section, we do feature a little bit more information about our Speakers Bureau and what's involved with it, the time commitment, what you can do to participate, and then a submission form to share a brief look at your story. So we've also received some recommendations, probably from some people on the phone today, both public and private agency staff. Some of our current families and youth have recommended people to us, and then some of our other partners, CCAI, Voice for Adoption, other AdoptUSKids partners, grantees. We have recruited from our social media pages on Facebook and Twitter, and also at the different conferences that we attend. We have a flyer where we ask people to share their story, and we follow up with them after the conference. And again, a lot of our current Speakers Bureau members have made excellent recommendations for us. So now that you've done a little bit of recruiting, you might have a few families, youth, or professionals that are ready to go. What's next? And we developed a formal process, our SOP, our standard operating protocol, and we purposely drafted a formal process. We wanted to have scripts for when people would reach out on the phone, as well as identify a follow-up process. So that can include some kind of database. It could be Excel, it could be a current membership database that you have. We use Salesforce here. We also have a family summary form that gathers basic information on the families. And then if I could just have you take one piece away from this webinar today, it would be to ensure that you have a consent form from everyone. And if it is from a youth that is under 18, that both the youth and the parent have acknowledged and signed that. And to, again, make sure that you have that in writing and that it is to use their stories and images, photos, and then also how you're going to use that. So are they speaking for you? Are you going to use their story on your social media channels, on their website? Is it in a video? Just to be very clear about that and to help make sure that everyone is on the same page with how information and photos and stories are being utilized. We also ask a series of questions to get some additional background information. And we do this and we go a little bit in depth because we do like to have a really solid understanding of the background. Because we are then better able to align opportunities appropriately. So next slide. We recommend media training for everyone who is going to have spokespeople speaking for their organization. We do have webinars and in-person training available. Some are archived online, as well as ones that can be scheduled for reference and use. Our media training really covers the background, so the background for the organization and the mission, how to develop specific messages, some storytelling tips, and preparing for different types of interviews. So for example, television is going to be much more visual, and so what that means as far as what to wear, your body language, and also keeping messages a little bit shorter. You usually have less time in that type of environment. And we also help the speakers understand the audience and the opportunity because, again, you'll be speaking differently with a television reporter than you would, for example, at a local church group or at an orientation meeting. There's also the national versus local opportunities, and sometimes that can happen for social media channels. So you think that it's your local social media channel in Duluth, Minnesota, but that can also go viral, and all of a sudden it's national. So keeping that in mind, helping them address key messages and making sure that those are developed in advance and that everyone's really comfortable with the information that is being shared. And then also just understanding what the goals are for the opportunity. Are you fundraising? Are you recruiting? Are you raising awareness? Because again, your messaging will change depending on what your goals are for the opportunity. And then I think one thing that you might not think of for a speakers bureau is just to follow up. So whether that's immediately after the event or a couple of days after the event or opportunity, really touch base with your speakers, make sure that they are doing okay. Was there anything about the opportunity that made them uncomfortable, that they would like additional help or support with in refining messaging or how to respond to a question? And are they okay and comfortable with the information they shared? We've had speakers that have had to respond to questions that they weren't necessarily expecting. And especially with youth, I think it's important because if they give some information that maybe just kind of came out when they were responding to a question, but then they sort of wish that they hadn't said that. So just making sure that they're okay and making sure that they're comfortable with everything that was shared. So next slide, please. Now we can talk a little bit more about messaging. Again, some of this is very particular for youth, and we use an image that's similar to a stoplight, so the red, yellow, and green zones. And green zones is kind of exactly that. Green means go, so kind of all information is shared at this level. Yellow, cautionary, so information that you want to think about. You're probably okay sharing it, but you want to give it some thought on how it's presented and when and where you present it. And then red would be information that you don't want to share publicly, and to make sure that you know what that information is and then how to respond to it if you've perhaps got a question around that. And I think it's important, again, and this comes back to understanding the background of the families or youth that you're working with, is just to be mindful of questions or stories that can trigger memories or trauma. And again, that's another area where that follow-up is important. For parents, one thing that we speak to them about is it is their story as well, but we also ask them to think about how they're going to share their experiences as it relates to the youth. And we always encourage them to talk with their youth about how they want their stories shared and what information they're comfortable sharing about them, if any. And there are ways to do that. We have parents that talk specifically about their adoption experience, but they don't necessarily mention any information or background on their youth. And again, I think for parents, it's important to keep in mind when you're telling a story or if you're advocating and what's appropriate when. And for professionals, we usually pair professionals with our families and youth to help them answer process questions, data questions, and to just offer support throughout the process, whatever that opportunity might be. And we also really help prepare the professionals for difficult questions. So media training is really helpful to deflect conversations and questions that aren't relevant to what you want to focus on. And that could be something's going on in the news and they only want to talk about that, but you were first, talking about just a personal story, but now all of a sudden, something happened, legislation passed, there was an emergency, something, and really just how to kind of get through that interview or opportunity if other things are going on in the world. Next slide, please. I think one of the areas that we have really worked on these past few years is developing relationships with our speakers that extend beyond the opportunity. And I know I mentioned earlier that we really, in the past, would work with spokespeople for really specific opportunities. And again, that was sort of the extent of it. Now we really try to get to know the families. We offer a closed Facebook group for our spokespeople to share their stories, to keep up to date with them, understand what's going on with them. We've had a lot of families that have added to their families, so they've adopted again, or they're currently fostering, or their family situations might have changed. They might have moved to a different state, and all of that makes a difference. So we like to keep up with where they are in life. It also helps us identify opportunities that align with families' different strengths and what their comfort levels are. So there are some families that want to be on television or video, and they're perfectly fine with that. And there's other families that are like, I'm just more of a public speaker, and that's where my comfort zone is. Or, I'd rather just have my story featured online or with a newspaper or radio article, and that's where I'm comfortable at. And I think for youth, again, it's particularly important to remember that something that they're really comfortable sharing at age 18, to maybe ask them, are you going to be comfortable sharing that same information when you're 22 or 24? And just really helping them think that through because they will be obviously at different life stages. When possible, offer honorariums if you can. Everyone loves Target gift cards or a simple follow-up thank you. Just acknowledge their assistance and support with their personal story. So let's take another poll question. What would be most helpful to support your effort to engage trained spokespeople or family speakers in your work? We'll give everyone a minute to respond to that. All right, let's take a look at the results. Wonderful. So 61% having materials we can use adopt to train spokespeople. That is very doable. So that's wonderful information to have. All right, so I'm delighted to move now into our expert panel of speakers today. We have Amy Arnston from Duluth, Minnesota. She's an adoptive parent. And we have Amber Thompson, also an adoptive mom from North Carolina. And Trina Fraley, an adoption social worker from Randolph County, also in North Carolina. And last but certainly not least, Bob Hearn is our moderator today, and he is the National Project Director for AdoptUSKids. So Bob, I'm going to turn this over to you for the panel.
Thank you, Melissa, and I really want to thank the panelists for taking the time to speak to you all today. Obviously, it's something that's important to all of us. And I'd like to start with Trina, who works as an adoption social worker with the state of North Carolina. And Trina, can you tell us why you have recommended not just the Thompson family, but other families for the media training with AdoptUSKids?
In our case, we realized the strengths that some of our families had, and we wanted to utilize those as much as possible to reach potential adoptive and foster parents. And the families that we selected to nominate based on their experience and willingness to foster or adopt teens, youth of different races, their strength in shared parenting, and their community outreach.
That's great. And can you tell me, how have you used these families within your own county?
In addition to the activities and events that our families have worked with AdoptUSKids on, they have presented to our DSS board and county commissioners at meetings. They have hosted informational sessions for prospective families. They have assisted with recruitment events. Amber Thompson actually teaches our MAP class and first aid and CPR. She also, her whole family actually serves on our MAP panel, which is the North Carolina foster parent training program for those who are not familiar with that. Both families that we have trained are featured in or have been featured in newspaper articles and have also assisted with many recruitment events, if I didn't already say that. In addition, they have created a support group on Facebook and are doing all kinds of activities and providing information through that outlet as well.
That's great. And so I want to bring into the conversation Amy Arnston and Amber Thompson, who were two families that actually went through the AdoptUSKids media training last year, and I have the pleasure of knowing. And so for both of you, could you tell us a little bit about what your media training experience was like, and how has the training been a benefit to you and your community?
Who do you want to go first, Bob?
Amber, how about you go first?
Okay. So our experience was very positive. I don't think we really knew what to expect at first. But when we arrived with AdoptUSKids, we were immediately welcomed as we just felt like such a part of the family. And just the very next day, our family as a whole was trained, and the training was very educational. We had never had any formal training as far as how to share our story appropriately. And our 20-year-old, who was a 17-year-old adoptee, really obtained a lot of skills for how to share his story appropriately. So it really, I felt, and so did my family, we felt empowered after our training with AdoptUSKids to share our story on different levels. And it really helped us know how to navigate the very hard questions that negative questions or questions that bring up too much emotion. The training was very beneficial in how to handle those questions. So we felt that the training was invaluable. And after our training, we were more willing and apt, not that we weren't willing before, but we felt more prepared to say yes to any offer that was made for us. So the training was very beneficial for our family and everyone involved, I felt like. So I'll turn it over to Amy.
Yeah, this is Amy. I would absolutely agree. By participating in the media training, I know we all became more confident and really well-versed to have some of the impromptu elevator talks ready for foster to adopt, and in our case, with the teenager. It definitely also made me more confident in my communication abilities. I've always been in types of positions in my career where I've had to do a lot of public speaking, but public speaking in regards to something this personal was something that I was not familiar with. And by participating in that, one of the surprises that came for me was I felt really confident and volunteered for a storytelling session that happened over the Christmas season in Minnesota. It was a very Merry Christmas adoption, and participated in sharing my 15-minute story in a storytelling way. And that was something I probably never would have done before if I had not participated in that training. From my son's perspective, I think one of the surprises from the training is that it was pretty much a year to the day when we had adoption, or when we had finalized his adoption. He was 17 when we finalized, and he was just turning 18 when we were at the training. So with really only a year under his belt of being part of a family again, and being, an 18-year-old older teen or a young adult, he necessarily didn't naturally talk about adoption or what it meant to him, or how it changed his life. So doing the training and being part of the media opportunities, I feel really opened some emotional doors for him, and that was very a positive experience.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. So since your media training with AdoptUSKids, what are some of the opportunities that have arisen for you in order to participate in both with AdoptUSKids and in your local communities?
We have had local newspaper reporters reach out. We've also had an increased amount of people that we've actually come into contact with every day say, I saw your story, or I noticed on Facebook that AdoptUSKids, posted your story, and I want to hear more about that. So more one-on-one people reaching out, as well as local community folks reaching out to hear our story. So our increase has been, it's been significant. And to echo off of what Amy said, my son Dylan also he has mentioned several times that he feels more comfortable sharing his story, and that he gets approached about his story more often. So not just on a local level, but anytime AdoptUSKids needs anything, we definitely feel like prepared and ready to help. So mostly we've seen local immediately, but that's my answer. Sorry, that was a little cut off, but.
And for me, this is Amy. I know that we had the great opportunity of working with AdoptUSKids and the Ad Council, and having a human interest story produced on our family, which was just very humbling and gratifying to be part of that process. And I know that was shared, I think, on their Facebook site and many other places. And in just the amount of attention that drew. We were really contacted by a number of people that we, hadn't spoke to in years, and just were made aware of their adoption journey and, wanting to know more information about, foster to adopt, about AdoptUSKids, anything along that line. And it was just really humbling, seeing the people, the amount of people that had contacted us to try to get more information, and both people we knew and we didn't know. I think one of the surprises there was the amount of dads that contacted my husband, trying to get more information from the dad perspective. And I think that was very gratifying for my husband to have that happen as well.
Yeah, and your husband was part of the dads panel, which I thought was an amazing and unique opportunity, not a group we hear from very often. So what was the most surprising thing about participating with the media training and being part of a speakers group?
This is Amber. For me, it was, I do a lot of public speaking, so for me it was the most surprising part was how things can turn negative really quickly and how to handle that. So I learned a lot about that. And the other surprising part were, which may not be what you're asking, Bob, I'm sorry, but parts of my son's story that I didn't really know that came out. So that was very rewarding for us as a family. And then just I did not realize that after the training, we would have so much more comfort in talking about our story. So those were the things that were surprising to me.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I know I kind of mentioned earlier that it really had opened some emotional doors for our son, and for him at being that age and being able to start expressing himself and realizing that what had happened to him was not his fault, I think was just huge. So that it was priceless for me. That was worth our trip out there, which was a great family vacation for us because we drove out to DC for the training. But it was very rewarding from that aspect, and it really gave us, in our 18-hour plus car ride back home, it really kind of catapulted some conversations that we have not had before. And you think you have a chance to talk about, everything about how you come to be a family and whatnot, but it had really opened other opportunities for conversations. And that was just very positive.
So we know the one thing that potential families want to hear from are families who have actually gone through the process and have experienced providing permanency for a child living in foster care. I'm very grateful for both of you for your willingness to share your story. And because we have so many child welfare professionals, both at the state and nonprofit level, from a family perspective, what are some of the recommendations that you would offer to those individuals who are thinking about creating a local Speakers Bureau in their community?
This is Amber. I would say absolutely go for it because a lot of times foster and adoptive parents are just waiting for someone to ask them. They do want to share their story. They may not have the tools necessary, but that's something that you can give them. But I would say, please do it. We want to share our story. We want to have an avenue to help others. And it really creates a support group among all of us to help each other. So if you're thinking about it, if you're on the fence and you think, wow, I don't want to do all that work, or is it really even worth it? Let me just say that I'm actually, and I know there's probably background noise and I apologize, but I'm on my way to our very first MAP class of this session, meaning we do it twice a year. And we have 31 people here tonight. So our recruitment has went up tremendously, and I really do say that that's a benefit directly of the Speakers Bureau, because it gave myself and Jennifer Allred, who's another Speakers Bureau member, avenues to get our voice out there and know appropriately how to do that. So if you have low attendance or you feel like you don't know how to recruit, a Speakers Bureau is definitely a way to do that. So don't worry about the stress of it, because your parents are going to be able to take care of it. Just go for it. That's all.
Yeah, I would echo that. And I would say for us personally, it's really hearing the stories when I think back to when we were, starting our foster to adopt process and that journey, it's really hearing every story that added to our decision to keep going. And so I think it's, everything that you can do, to get that up and running, I think is just going to be so beneficial, because that's what parents want to hear, or future families want to hear. They want to know, the ups and the downs, the goods and the bads of what families went through to get, to the end point of, being able to do the foster to adopt. And so I think the more involvement you can have from a speakers bureau, and the parents willing to participate, and the youth willing to participate, I think is all for the best.
Bob, do we have another question for our panelists?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. So Amber and
Yes.
Amy, thank you so much for taking the time to share with our colleagues today. I want to leave the last question for Trina. Trina, what would you recommend to your colleagues who are on the phone today about utilizing the AdoptUSKids Speakers Bureau media training and supporting families to continue to be a support as we recruit families for our children and youth who are living in foster care?
I think that Amy and Amber did a great job explaining some of the benefits, but just to add to that, I would say if you are considering it, do it. As Amber stated, we're seeing a huge increase in our MAP participation. Our last interest meeting had 18 couples, which is just amazing, and that is largely in part to the efforts of our families that have been trained by the Speakers Bureau. But in addition to that, what I would say is that the Speakers Bureau, the training, AdoptUSKids, what it has done is it has taken some of our already amazing families and given them the support and confidence and training that they need to enhance their ability to reach other families. And what we are seeing is just amazing. We're very impressed and appreciative.
Trina, Amber, Amy, again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Tracy?
Next slide. And now back to you, Melissa.
Great. Thank you. So yeah, I think Amy briefly alluded to our human interest stories, and we have had the opportunity to create a few of these, and Amy and her family were one of them. We also have some in the works, and we've really just found them to be really inspiring to prospective parents. It's a great way to introduce people to adoption from foster care and inspire them to find out more information. And again, just offers them the opportunity to hear from real people who've been there, done that. And also it's kind of a sneak peek into their everyday lives, which I think people really like, and I think that they really relate to. So the slide here lists a few of the families that we've worked with. Arnston family from Minnesota, Crenshaw family from Illinois, Liz and Ashley from North Carolina, and then we have a few in the works for the states of another one for North Carolina, Virginia, and Florida. And I think, again, just being able to see, for example, the Crenshaw families have a tradition of a Sunday dinner, and so there was just a bunch of food on the table and drinks, and people can really relate to that and see that, that's what our family looks like around the table. And so they've just been very heartwarming and inspiring. And if we could go to the next slide. there's a link on where you can find those if you want to take a look. And I also think that the links went out in the emails that came to you all before joining today. So feel free to take a look at those. And they are on our YouTube channel, and you can also link to them from our website. So if we could go to the next slide. We do offer media training both on-site and through webinars. We have some archived webinars that are on the AdoptUSKids website. So those are past trainings that we've done that you can really listen to anytime. And we've also done live webinars as well to groups of people where we have some poll questions and then also take questions like we're doing now for all of you. We have currently more than 100 speakers that include parents, youth, and professionals that are trained around the United States. And again, the speakers assist us with media opportunities. I think Amy and Amber, they might be a little afraid when they see our phone numbers calling them, like, what do they want now? But there's just always so many opportunities, events for us to share their stories. And they're all available to take a look at, to use for promotion opportunities, events like that. And we certainly appreciate all of their efforts to date with working with us on the Speakers Bureau. So Tracy, other stuff you'd like to add there?
Yes, so we're available to help child welfare systems, both public agencies and your private agency partners, in your efforts to plan, develop, and implement a Speakers Bureau of any size, or to put in place, what you need to have in place to have trained speakers ready to share their stories, even if that's a smaller scale. As part of our wide range of capacity building services that we provide to states, tribes, and territories, we can provide assistance in a range of formats. So it might be coaching calls or connecting you with peers around the country who have experience with building speakers bureaus, or offering feedback on your plans and templates, or providing remote or on-site training and strategies. So we can figure out together what would be a good fit, and we invite you to reach out to us to discuss how we can support you in developing or strengthening your Speakers Bureau. Next slide. Our contact information is provided here, and let me go to the next slide. And now we have an opportunity for some questions and answers. So, Melissa, we have a question for you. How often does AdoptUSKids offer media training, and what is the cost?
So there are no costs for the media training. We have traditionally offered the webinars quarterly. However, we've also offered them kind of on an on-demand basis. So if there's a particular group that needs to be trained, we have just offered those kind of as people have needed them as well, since it's often hard to find a time when everyone can get together, same time zone and all of that. So we've been doing more kind of ad hoc requests for the webinar trainings. And the in-person trainings we do once a year, usually in the summer, and we are actively recruiting new speakers to assist AdoptUSKids with our efforts for National Adoption Month and our National Adoption Campaign, which both Amber and Amy helped with last year. So if there are speakers that you would like us to speak with and potentially bring out for that training, you can certainly send those recommendations to Tracy or myself.
Thanks, Melissa. Another question that you touched on a bit, and this is for you again, Melissa. How do you encourage parents and caregivers in the Speakers Bureau to engage with their children in terms of talking together about what they're comfortable with them sharing?
So we always send questions in advance. So again, that's part of our forms that we have. So we have a bunch of standard questions that we ask, and just having done this throughout the years, we know there's some standard questions that media outlets, for example, are usually going to ask. And so we share those in advance with both the parents and the youth and ask them to consider how they would respond to those questions. And so we do that prior to them, again, participating in a webinar, and especially prior to the in-person training, because what we like to do is take a look at those responses and then help them refine those or tailor those messages to whatever the opportunity might be. And I think the other benefit that has then is that the parents and the youth have some of the questions in advance, and they can sit down together as a family and decide how to respond to those questions and what information, for example, they are comfortable sharing. We've had examples in the past include where one of our families was really comfortable doing public speaking until the daughter was getting ready to go to college. And then she said, you know what, I really would like to take a break from participating in really high profile events because I'm starting fresh. I'm going to college. No one knows my background. I'm starting anew, and wanted to be in control of when she shared her story and how she shared her story. And so I think that's something really important to talk about, and that's why I mentioned the age. So for example, at age 18, she was super comfortable with public speaking and sharing her story, but then again, hitting that 22, starting college, wanted to taper off a bit. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And then also, I think, just having the parents talk to the youth about what parts of their story they're comfortable being public. I think that just based on how media is consumed by people today, that you do have to be very cognizant of how you are and what you're sharing. Since a lot of things live online now, it's very difficult to remove once it's out there. So even if you post something online and you take it down later, there's screenshots or other ways that people have shared it. And so really sitting down and thinking about what you want to be out there publicly is very important, and especially for youth.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And I guess a question that really fits with that is, are there any special considerations for training or working with youth around sharing their stories? Anything you'd add? I know you already touched on it.
Yeah, I think what's most important with the youth is really helping them refine their messaging. And I think giving them permission to only share the parts of their story that they want to share. I think that probably over the course of their lives, they've been used to answering questions from adults that they're required to answer. And I think shifting that mindset a little bit, that they can now be in control of their story and in control of the information that's out there publicly, is really important. And obviously still wanting to tell a really good story, but I think that that's where we like to, again, focus on forward and future type thinking rather than what happened in the past. Because I think that when you focus on really anything that was in their past potentially, it always brings up the potential to trigger trauma or just bad memories. And so we try to be really, really careful with that and do more forward thinking with benefits of family and permanency. And I think the follow-up with youth is also very important, because sometimes we don't always have control over the questions that are asked. And so if they do get asked a question like, why were you in foster care? We've given them the tools to answer that question without having to give away any information that they're not comfortable sharing. And then also just making sure that they're okay, because any interview could potentially be difficult for them if it's a new experience. Not every day people have cameras in their faces or, their photos being shared online. So just making sure that they're still feeling really good about everything that's out there and how they're sharing their story.
Thank you, Melissa. Such important points. And then one question for Amy and Amber. what advice do you have for parents who are thinking about being in a speakers bureau, or families who are thinking of being involved?
This is Amy. I would absolutely encourage them to be a participant in it if they're interested at all in sharing their story. I can't emphasize enough how many people have come up to us and have thanked us for getting the word out there about foster to adopt. And, it's those stories that I think people really resonate with, and they want to know more about what other families have gone through. And so I just think anything that we can do to help get people adopted, to help get kids adopted is just vital.
Yeah, this is Emer. I'm going to echo off of what Amy said again. Even though we're in, different states, there's a lot of similarities in our stories, and she's absolutely right. Go for it. Get your story out there, because there's somebody that needs to hear it, especially with these teenagers. I cannot tell you how many people have said to us, we really thought that teenagers were difficult to adopt, or we never considered teenagers because we didn't want that to affect us negatively, and all of the stigma that goes with adopting a teenager. When you empower foster parents that have had, with adoptions of teenagers, they will shed light and the other side of the positivity of adopting a teenager. So I don't know with everybody's agency. I know there's a lot of people on the call, so I'm assuming there's some agencies that may have difficulty in getting foster parents for their teens. I would say this is a huge strategy to use, because, again, it really empowers us to share our story and share with others, and then others are very thankful because it really helps to relieve that stigma, or take away that stigma, that negative stigma that can be there for teenagers. So we've had, same thing that Amy said, we've had lots of people say, thank you so much for sharing your story. We had no idea, you gave us a different view, and now we're considering this. So I would, same thing Amy said, absolutely go for it and do it.
Thank you. So we're just a couple minutes before the hour, so I want to wrap up. Before we do, is there anything that any of our presenters or panelists want to add? Maybe anything that we missed? Okay, so I just want to say a huge thank you to all of our participants who joined us today, to our presenters, and especially to our panel. Thank you so much for being on this webinar. A quick reminder to everyone to please complete the survey that will be in your email, and to please be in touch. We look forward to hearing from you and working with you. Have a good afternoon or a good day.